It's the morning of June 10th, 2009. We're at the Eagleton Institute of Politics on the New Brunswick campus of Rutgers University. We're here for the Rutgers program on the governor. I'm Michael Aron of NJN News. This morning we're going to talk to Michael Fedorko. Mike was a 30-year state police officer. He headed the security unit that protected Governor Brendan Byrne and was head of the security unit during the administration of Governor Tom Kean. He would later go on to other positions within the state police, including acting superintendent for a brief period of time. He then served 10 years on the Casino Control Commission, and in 2009 is about to become superintendent of police for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. Let's start at the very beginning. Where are you from?
Actually, I was born in Lakeland, Florida during the war. My father was in the Army, and that's where we were living. He was somewhere else, and then after the war, he moved back to Trenton because that's where he was from. And I grew up in Trenton.
How old were you when you moved back to Trenton?
It was about 9 months old.
Went to Trenton schools?
Trenton Catholic, which closed at the end of my junior year and ruined my football career. I went to Hamilton, Hamilton High West, and graduated in 1963.
Then what'd you do?
I worked for the, well, I was actually trying to get into West Virginia. They had talked to me about a football scholarship. But because of Trenton Catholic closing, we couldn't find a coach. The priests had all gotten transferred all over the East Coast. And by the time the process went through, it was like June, and they were talking to me about going to a junior college that they had some affiliation with called Potomac Junior College in West Virginia. But it was kind of late to get in that year, and the coach told me, well, wait till next year. So I went to work for it was then called the Highway Department. Now it's the Department of Transportation. And I worked there for 2.5 years and ended up going in the Marines. Because I decided I wanted to be a trooper, and I had taken the state police test, went through the whole process, and I had gotten rejected. And they would send you a letter if you want to find out what the problem is. You can come up and talk to us. So I did. And I talked to the personnel officer, and he said, the reason we didn't take you is because you hadn't gone into service. This is 1965. They could do things like that. And he said, I cannot tell you this officially. He said, but off the record, if you go in the military and come out, we'd probably take you. So I had a friend who was leaving for Paris Island in 20 days. He said, why don't you go with me? We'll go in on the buddy plan. I said, sure. So I went down, I talked to the recruiter, and he said, well, I don't know if I can get you in or not. And I said, well, the deal is either you get me in with him or I'm going to do something else. So 20 days later, we're on an airplane for Paris Island, and when we got off the bus, you always get off the bus at midnight there just to confuse everything. And got off the bus, and I'm thinking to myself, what have I done? We went in on the buddy plan, which we were supposed to be together through boot camp, and the last time I saw him is when we got our haircuts, and I didn't see him for 11 weeks, and it turns out he was in the platoon upstairs, but neither one of us had the guts to tell the drill instructor that they had broken their agreement with us and we were supposed to be together. So
there was a war on at the time.
Yeah, there was a war on. This was probably 6 or 8 months after the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. And everybody was getting drafted anyway. As a matter of fact, I got drafted in boot camp. And
into the Army?
Into the Army. And I took some abuse from the drill instructors over getting drafted in the Army. So.
And how shortly after boot camp did you get shipped to Vietnam?
Actually, from boot camp, my MOS was 0331, which is, 03 means infantry, and then the other two numbers, 31 means whatever specialty you are. I was in machine guns. So I got sent to Camp Lejeune, to an infantry unit there, and it a very nice experience. They were sending our battalion out to the Caribbean on a Navy fleet. There's actually a battalion of Marines in every major ocean all the time, and we were there for 6 months on a bunch of old naval ships. Fortunately, I was on an aircraft carrier for helicopters, which was about 3 years old, so it was air conditioned, but none of the other ships were air conditioned. And what you would do is they would take you to an island, Vieques, which has since been shut down, right off the coast of Puerto Rico, and you would do different sort of maneuvers. You'd stay there for like a week and a half, and then they would take you someplace for a couple of days to relax. Like we'd go back to San Juan, or we would go to Aruba, or one of the other islands, and that was the way it was for 6 months. The last thing we did was we went to Panama, and there's a special forces school there at Fort Sherman. It's called Jungle Warfare School, and we spent 3.5 weeks out in the jungle learning how to survive and do different things. And we're all, I mean, I was 21 years old, but most of the guys were 18, 19, and we're all saying, you know, what are they doing this for at the end of the cruise? Because right after that, we were going back to North Carolina to Camp Lejeune. So as soon as we got back, they transferred the whole battalion to Vietnam. This was probably September, and I was in Vietnam. I got to Vietnam probably sometime in mid-November.
Khe Sanh was one of the well-known battles of the Vietnam War, and your bio says you were wounded at Khe Sanh?
I was wounded just outside of Khe Sanh. I was with a unit called the 3rd Battalion, 3rd Marines. When I got to Vietnam, our company area was in a place called Dong Ha, which is about 5-6 miles south of the DMZ. But my platoon was about 15 miles northwest of there, so we were right near the DMZ. There are some famous places there if you've read anything about Vietnam, called the Rock Pile, and there was another mountain range called the Razorback. We were near there, and our area was between Con Thien and Khe Sanh. That was our patrol area. And when I got wounded, we were just at the foot of one of the hills at Khe Sanh.
How did you get wounded?
I got shot. I got shot in the leg. We were on a probably, I think, was a 15-day patrol. The whole battalion was on a patrol because there were large contingents of NVA soldiers up there. Where the Marines were in North Vietnam, in the northern part of South Vietnam, you dealt with the North Vietnamese Army. Further down south is where the guys in the black pajamas, the Viet Cong. Thank you. I couldn't think of the name. That's where the Viet Cong were, but I never really saw any of them. We just saw the North Vietnamese soldiers. So we were on this 15-day operation, and we got up to the where these hills are. They're 861, 881, and that's really where this NVA, North Vietnamese Army contingent was. We took several casualties the day I got wounded. March 24th, 1967 is when I got wounded, and I was medevaced out by helicopter to Da Nang. I got operated on in the Philippines, and that's where they decide where you're going to go. And the doctor came in, and he's going, well, you're going here, you're going here. And he got to me, he said, you're going to Philadelphia Naval Hospital. So from Philippines, we went to Japan for a couple of days. And there we boarded a C-141 and stopped in Elmendorf, Alaska for fuel, and then We landed at McGuire Air Base. Spent a day, 2 days in Walston Army Hospital, and then they picked us up and took us to Philadelphia Naval Hospital. I spent about 4.5 months in the hospital in Philly.
Really? Must have been a serious wound.
Yeah, I had nerve damage. The doctor told me that when they had operated on me, they cut me in the back. I got shot in the front of my thigh, and it came out in the back. And they operated on me in the back of my leg, and the doctor told me when he cut me open, he said the nerve that goes up your leg was laying in the bullet hole, and it was stretched like a rubber band. He told me, he says, "You're lucky, because if that had broken, you wouldn't have been able to use your leg when you walk." So,
you walk normally today.
yeah, I have a little bit of numbness in my leg, but nothing appreciable where it's kept me from doing anything.
So after 4.5 months at a naval hospital in Philadelphia, did you go back into the service, or were you done?
No, I was still in the Marines. I had probably about 7 months to go. I got sent to Quantico, which is where the Marine officer schools are, and I worked in one of the officer schools for my remaining time in the Marines.
And was it correct that if you had gone into the service, you could then get into the state police?
Yes.
How did that happen?
I came out. Actually, I took the test for the state police while I was still in the Marines. And went through the testing process. It takes about 9-10 months to go through the whole testing process. So I took the written test while I was in the Marines. By the time we got to the oral interview, I was out of the Marines. And I had broken my wrist on a motorcycle accident. So I went to the interview with a cast on my left arm, my left wrist. And the captain that was in charge of the interview board, name was Leroy Umholtz. He was a Marine. And there was another captain on the board who was also a Marine. So he looked at me, and we talked a little bit about, what I had done in the Marines, and he said, "Well," he said, "you went through this before, and we know you went in the Marines to get in the state police. So," he said, "do you think this broken bone is going to prevent you from getting through the academy?" And I said, "No, sir." And I was accepted into the academy in November of 1968.
Was your leg injury in any way a factor in the state police's consideration of you? Were they concerned whether you were fit enough to?
They were
be a
concerned.
trooper?
They were concerned, but my records from my medical records from the Marines, they looked at them, and when I took the physical, the PT test, I did everything I was supposed to do, and then there's a medical examination that you have to go through, and everything was okay.
Why'd you want to be a trooper?
I guess really because of the same reason I went into the Marines. Although I went into the Marines because of the state police, but it's always been, I've always had the desire to help people, to try to make society better.
Lots of different ways of doing that.
There is, but I guess that was what I was meant to do.
So you were accepted into the state police in what year?
I went in the academy in November '68. I got out in February of 1969.
And what's notable about your first 3 or 4 years as a trooper?
Well, when I was the commandant of the academy, which is one of the best jobs I've ever had, along with executive protection, but as a commandant of the academy, you really don't deal a lot with the recruits because they're told that you don't want to deal with a commandant, you don't want to see him, because if you do, that means you're on your way out. But there's 3 or 4 times during their training that you talk to them. And at the end of their time, when I would talk to them, I would tell them the best thing you're ever going to do in the state police is your first several years when you're on the road. And that's probably the best time, because you don't really have a lot of organizational responsibility other than to do your job. You're not supervising people. You're just out there dealing with the public, trying to make the world a better place for everybody, and it was a lot of fun. Plus, my first 6 years, well, actually, the whole time I was a uniformed trooper, we were still living in the stations, which was a fantastic time. You would work 2 or 3 days on and sleep there, and then you'd be off for 2 or 3 days. But it was a good time in the state police because you knew everybody that you worked with. You worked with everybody. It was a great time.
You drove a patrol car?
Yeah. Everybody does when they get out of the academy.
At what point were you involved in any kind of civil disturbance, riot?
1970, my third station. At the time, you get transferred 3 times. You get transferred every 6 months for your first year and a half. So I was at my third station, which was Edgewater Park, and we got called. We got sent to Asbury Park for the riots that they were having down there, and they put us up. We were on post probably for like 16 or 18 hours a day, and when you were off, they put us up in the Long Branch Armory. They had cots lined up, and you just sleep for a couple hours, and then you'd have to go back out again.
How was that duty?
It was interesting. I really felt bad for the people who lived in Asbury Park because they really didn't want any part of this. And it seemed like most of the people that were instigators were not from Asbury Park. And the people, Springdale Avenue was where my post was most of the time, and the people would come out of the house and say, we're glad you guys are here because we really don't want any of this stuff. And
was it a race riot?
Yeah, it was a race riot. Yeah.
What provoked it?
I really don't remember. I really do not remember.
You told us off camera that you were also involved in one of the most famous state police matters, the murder of a trooper by Joanne Chesimard and a radical group. Was that 1973, if memory serves me correctly?
It was 73, yeah.
What was your involvement in that case?
I had just gotten transferred off the turnpike. I was out there for 2 years, and you're transferred in groups, and the group that went out to replace me, one of the troopers was Werner Forster, who was killed by Joanne Chesimard. I was stationed at Princeton Substation on Route 1, which was also it was a headquarters for Central Jersey, but they also had a substation there, a road station. And we were awakened early in the morning to go out to the turnpike, and we were looking for Joanne Chesimard. Well, we didn't know it was Joanne Chesimard, but we were looking for somebody who had shot Forster and another trooper named Jimmy Harper, who I worked with on the turnpike. He was out there when I was out there. And we were sent to the New Brunswick station, and they sent us down south to, I think it was milepost 85 or something like that. And that's where the car was, her car. And we were looking in the fields for her, and a trooper did find her. A trooper named Bob Palanshore got out of the car and was walking into the field and came across her, and she was leaning over one of her friends or one of her guys who got shot. I think eventually died, and he arrested her.
They were a radical Black Power group. What were they?
Yeah, they were I'm trying to think of the name of their group. I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, they were a Black Power group.
And she was subsequently sprung from prison, is that
Yeah,
correct?
Clinton. She was in Clinton Reformatory, which, if my memory serves me correctly, was a place for women, and she was sprung from there and is now in Cuba. And there have been, over the years, the United States government has tried to get her out. Just lately, they've talked to some of Castro's people to try to get her back.
You think we'll ever get her back?
Maybe when Castro dies, I don't know. But right now, I don't think that's her. As long as he's alive, I don't think.
It remains an important cause to the state police, does it not?
Yeah, it does, because she executed him. He was shot behind the ear, and I can remember very vividly the picture of him laying alongside the troop car, sprawled out with blood all over the place.
When did you enter the Executive Protection Unit?
I got transferred there at the end of Burns' first term. Actually, before that, I was sent to the State House. I was still in uniform, and there's a uniform contingent at the State House. I was sent there in '75 for about a year because a trooper had hurt his leg and was operated on, and because that's a reimbursed position, they had to fill it. So those of us in the state police who lived in Trenton always used to joke that we were victims of geography because of all the special details around the city of Trenton. If you lived in Trenton, you were a prime candidate for these assignments. So I got sent to the State House for about a year as a uniform trooper, and Brendan Byrne was the governor. So I don't think any of the people that worked for him would remember me, but I got to know them and Brendan Byrne. So that when I got transferred to Executive Protection, my first day there, when I was introduced to him, Byrne looked at me and he says, "Oh," he says, "the new faces are old faces." So he remembered me being at the State House.
What do you remember about your first awareness of him? Were you aware of him before you went to work at the State House, or only afterwards?
No, I was aware of him before. Actually, I was on the turnpike, or had just gotten transferred, and the State Troopers Fraternal Association, which is the state police union, they don't call it a union though, was contacted by several of the gubernatorial candidates that they would come in and speak to the membership. And I only remember going up to hear Ann Klein and Brendan Byrne, but I wanted to make a point of seeing Brendan Byrne because I had read a lot about him, and I was really impressed with his background, his military background, which I found out more. I found more out about his military background in the last 6 months than I really ever knew. It was always my understanding that B-17 people who flew in B-17s during the war, 25 missions you went home. But I read where he did 51 missions, which is like unbelievable. And he told me he was stationed in Italy. I think Foggia was the place he told me, Foggia, Italy. But anyway, getting back to this, when he came to talk to the State Troopers Fraternal Association, it was in a first aid squad building right behind the Colonial Firehouse on Route 18, right near the exit 9 on the turnpike. And as I said, I was really impressed with his military background and his time as a prosecutor. Essex County Prosecutor's Office at the time was always held in high esteem in law enforcement because they were considered, if not the premier prosecutor's office, one of the top ones. And then his time as a judge. So he was a law enforcement guy, and I really wanted to hear what he had to say, and I was very impressed with him.
Did you support him when he ran for governor in '73?
I don't really like to talk about who I vote for.
Okay. So you spent a year at the State House in uniform, and then you got promoted to the Executive Protection Unit. Is that a promotion, by the way? Or is it just a transfer?
It's a transfer, but it's I consider it a promotion. I mean, it's a transfer, but it's a better job, I thought.
And suddenly you're in all sorts of new situations and very private situations with the governor, correct?
Correct.
That gives you an incredible window into what's really going on in the state of New Jersey, does it not?
Yeah, I always said that I got a master's degree from the University of Pennsylvania in governmental administration, but I really got a PhD when I was in the governor's office, because that was an education that most people don't really have the advantage of getting.
What don't they see?
Well, they don't. First of all, they don't see the man or the woman. They see the person on television, and that's not really what the person is. And they don't see the different crises that come up in government, the day-to-day stuff, the problem-solving issues, which I was not involved in the problem-solving issues, but you hear about them later on, or you'll hear conversations in the back seat of the car, and that was really the interesting part. But I think the most interesting thing is what you see on television is not really what the person is.
And what did you see in Brendan Byrne?
He's a very funny person when he wants to be. He has a great sense of humor. After a while, when he got comfortable with you, he would say things to you that, you'd take a step back and say, "Whoa, he just said that? He just told me that?" But after he knew that he could trust you, and you had a relationship, it was.
Is there one of those little comments that you can recall that you can share, or?
Probably not. Dan Weissman always told me that I have a Pulitzer Prize winning book up here.
Dan Weissman was the State House reporter for the
Yes.
Star Ledger.
Yes, he was.
How many different troopers were there at the time among whom 2 or 3 would be chosen to be with the governor at a certain shift?
The way it worked was when you first went there, your first couple of weeks, you were the midnight guy at the house, and in the morning you'd stay a little while and they'd show you different things. Then as time progressed, you would be assigned to the first lady or the family, and then after a while, if they thought you were good enough, then you would be assigned to the governor.
Was there a typical day?
Actually, no. I mean, every day was different. With Governor Byrne, a lot of times we'd leave for the State House in the morning and get on a helicopter and go someplace and end up all over New Jersey. And New Jersey is a state. It's a shame that some of the governors after him, and even after Governor Kane actually, really didn't make use of the helicopter, because New Jersey it's a state where you really need the helicopter. I mean, people want to see the governor, and it's a state that's even more congested as the years go on, and I think that's a big mistake that Governor Whitman made by making that a campaign issue in the beginning, and I think she was always sorry that she did that.
Do you have a sense of whether governors now feel free or constrained in using the helicopter?
Not really. No, I really don't. I know. I mean, I know they use them, but I don't know how often or.
Um, how did you like the people around Bern?
Um, they were an interesting group. What impressed me initially is most of them were all Ivy League people, and I guess that's why I went to the University of Pennsylvania, because I was really impressed with that, and it worked out where I was able to do that. But
When did you go to Penn?
I went to Penn in '86. They had a program where it was sort of like a scholarship thing. The state absorbed a third, the school absorbed a third, and I paid a third. And they picked certain people from state government to go. And in fact, a guy named Jim Spady, who was the first director for the state law enforcement planning group in New Jersey, was the head of the school. I think Governor Hughes appointed him to, it was called SLEPA. Governor Hughes appointed him to that.
Did you get a degree from Penn?
Yeah, I got a master's degree.
So you were impressed with the people around him and their education, and you wanted to get some of it yourself?
Yeah, I did. I ended up going to college when I had about 4 or 5 years in the state police on the GI Bill. I went to it was then Trenton State, it's now the College of New Jersey. I went at night, and I finished in 4.5 years. I took a full load every semester, and I went in the summertime because I didn't want to go to school for 10 years. That's just, and then I had looked around about getting a graduate degree, and nothing really interested me until the late '80s or mid '80s, and I found out about this program.
What did Brendan Byrne like to do when he wasn't sitting at his desk?
Brendan Byrne was a good athlete. He was a tennis player, swam.
Swam where?
In Morven. There was a pool in the back. Incidentally, I took a tour not too long ago with the president of Stockton College. Morven was owned by the Stockton family, and left it to the state to be used as a state facility. In fact, I think it's in the deed that if it is ever not used by the state, then it goes back to the Stockton family. I got a call from the president of Stockton College. I see him a lot in Atlantic City. And he told me he was going up to Morven for a tour because apparently at Stockton College they have some things from the Stockton family, from Richard Stockton, who I think was a signer of the Declaration of Independence. And I told him, I said, geez, I spent a number of years at Morven when Brendan Byrne was governor. So he said, well, would you like to go back and see it? I said, yeah. I said, because I haven't been back there since then. I've been past it, but I've never been in the building. So we went up and we had a tour. As we were going through it, I would tell him, well, this is where the troopers used to be. This was the governor's bedroom. This was the governor's sitting room. This is where the kids were. I showed him the room on the 3rd floor where we got about 6 o'clock in the morning. We caught a guy going up there who had escaped from the Princeton Neuropsychiatric Institute in Princeton. I don't think he knew where he was or he knew where he was going. He was just climbing up the fire escape, and we pulled him off of there and arrested him.
Did you have sleeping quarters in the house?
There was a room in the back, or a building in the back, where the troopers could stay over if they wanted to.
Was Morven difficult to secure? Were there any problems in keeping Morven secure?
Initially, there were, because it wasn't fenced in, and anybody could walk up to the door. There's a story, I don't know how true it is, but there's a story that one night, I think when Governor Hughes was governor, some kids from Hunn went over to some park in Princeton where there were cannons, and they drug the cannons over and pointed them at the front door of Morven. And I've asked a couple of people about that, and they said, yeah, that was a true story. But after this incident where we took the guy off the fire escape, they immediately began planning and eventually constructed a 10-foot high wrought iron fence all the way around the property.
That's not that big a house. Brendan Byrne and Jean Byrne had 7 children, right? Was it crowded in there?
Well, the troopers never went upstairs, up on the second floor. That was kind of off limits to us. That was their living area. Yeah, it was crowded. It was crowded. Brendan Byrne always said that was really not, although it looks from a big house, it really wasn't a big house inside. And there are a lot of little rooms. It's cut up a lot inside. It's not as big as you think it would be.
So it makes sense to you that the state shifted governor's mansions and now Drumthwacket is the governor's mansion?
Yeah, he did that at the end of his term. They began fixing Drumthwacket up. And when Tom Kane became governor, that was the governor's official residence.
Was he a sports fan?
Brendan Byrne,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Who did he root for?
Giants and Yankees. He told me, and he showed me one time, he has the program book, and he was at the game when Don Larson pitched the perfect game at Yankee Stadium. And I always enjoyed, he would go to a lot of athletic events. The first time the Giants played at Giant Stadium, we went to just about every home game. He would go to the, I remember this because we went to this a couple of times, at the Waldorf, the College Football Hall of Fame dinner. And it was really exciting for me because up on the dais were all these guys who were big-time college ball players when I was a kid growing up. I met one of the Four Horsemen, Paul Horning. It was a fun time. But he used to like to do things like that too.
So being with the governor, you got entree into some pretty amazing places.
Yes, I did. When Jimmy Carter was governor, he had a relationship with Jimmy Carter. We got invited to the White House when I believe it was called the Camp David Accord, when Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat signed this document. It was done on the front lawn of the White House, and I was standing about 20 feet away from Anwar Sadat, off to the side.
Was Brendan Byrne invited for that ceremony, or he happened to be
No, he was
visiting the White
invited there.
House?
He was invited there for the ceremony.
Uh-huh.
We spent a lot of time in Washington. He would get invited down for things. I'm going to say sometimes it seemed like we were down there twice a week.
How would you get down?
I would drive down.
Drive him down?
He would fly sometimes.
He got criticized for traveling a lot, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Justifiably so?
No, I think that's what a governor's supposed to do. The governor's like the front man for the state of New Jersey, and I think, I mean, although people took their shots, I think he did what he was supposed to do. I remember Moon Mullins one time at a legislative correspondence dinner did a skit about something that was happening, and he said Brendan Byrne stopped there on the way to the airport. I mean, but that's what governors are supposed to do.
Was he a good front man for New Jersey?
Absolutely.
How so?
He made a point of getting out there and doing things for Jersey. He had a really good relationship with the president. At the time, he was, I think he was the head of the Democratic governors when Ronald Reagan became president. I got to stand on the reviewing stand of Ronald Reagan's first inaugural parade with Brenda Byrne, and I went over and said hello to Omar Bradley, who was the last surviving five-star general in the military. He was in a wheelchair and he was covered in a blanket. I'm not even sure he knew where he was, but I got to shake hands with him, and it was a big thrill.
Was that the very cold inauguration?
That was a very cold inauguration, but inside the reviewing stand, it was heated. In fact, I think there was snow on the ground too. And I remember another event too. We were talking about sporting events. Governor Byrne went to Chicago to swear in the whatever they call the national commander of the VFW, who was from New Jersey, and whoever that was had asked him to do that, and he said, "Yeah, if you get elected, I'll go." And we went out there, and Ronald Reagan was running for president, and that was really the first time I got to meet Ronald Reagan and shake hands with him. But even a little more of a thrill for me is I got to meet George Hallis, who Reagan had come out there. George Hallis, he walked out on stage, he was walking with two canes. But that was a thrill because that was one of the guys that started the National Football League. And later on, we would go to the Kentucky Derby a couple of times when I was in executive protection. And the Sports Authority's table was right next to the Pittsburgh Steelers table, and I got to meet Art Rooney, who was another founding member of the National Football League. So that was a thrill.
What position did you play as a football player?
Center and linebacker.
Looks it.
Yeah. I should have said quarterback.
I would have said looks it. Was Brendan Byrne an early to bed, early to rise type guy, or was he more like a Bill Clinton, up all night talking to people?
Brendan Byrne was in bed by 9 o'clock, and he was up probably 5:30. You knew when you went out on trips that he was in at 9, but you knew you had to be up early the next day. So
a disciplined man?
Very, very disciplined.
A serious man?
Yeah, he was serious. Again, one-on-one, he was a little more light, but he was serious.
Were there things that bothered him? Did he have any pet peeves that you recall?
One that I remember specifically was he wouldn't wait for anybody. When it was time to go, we left. And sometimes people got left behind. He had a guy working for him named Fedorko Fatemi, who's, I think, if I remember correctly, his father was the ambassador from Aron to the United Nations. And I see Fedorko from time to time. He and Joe Biden were very close, by the way. And Fedorko's, I don't think Fedorko's wore a watch because he was always late. And a lot of times he would get left. If we were flying somewhere, he would get left. But then 20 minutes later, he would show up wherever we were.
Apparently Byrne said in an interview that he hated the opening of fishing season. Does that ring any bell with you?
No.
Okay. Now, during the Byrne years, did you become the head of the Executive Protection Unit?
I was one of the. I wasn't actually in charge of the unit, but I was in charge of the governor's operations.
The unit is larger than just covering the governor?
Yeah.
Covers the Attorney General?
Attorney General, Secretary of State, later on it was the chief of staff, and they had a trooper assigned to the Chief Justice.
About how many people comprised the Executive Protection Unit in those days?
In those days, probably between 20 and 30.
What do you think it is today?
I don't know.
You enjoyed the work? The assignment?
I did. I did because it was something different every day. I got to do things that a kid who grew up in the housing projects in Trenton would never have access to. And it, as I said before, it was an education for me. It really was. I think it helped shape my career in the state police and what I've done after.
How so?
Well, again, meeting the people that worked for Byrne, who were really top-notch people. He always said that, he said, the people in the governor's office are the people who make the governor's office. And he had people that were just first rate as far as I'm concerned.
Did you go on any foreign trips with Brendan Byrne?
I don't believe I went out of the country with him. We did with Tom Kane, but a lot of in-country trips with Brendan Byrne. Oh, we went to Jamaica. That was a out-of-the-country trip with Brendan Byrne.
Was that a pleasure trip?
It was no. I mean, every trip was business. If there pleasure was mixed in with it, but every trip was business. He had been invited down by the new premier of Jamaica. I believe his name was Edward DeSev, who went to Harvard. And it was just after the communists had lost power. They were trying to get American governors to come down and see Jamaica and see what it was all about for tour, to try to promote tourism. And we spent about 4 or 5 days down there.
Good trip?
Yeah, it was a good trip, yeah. Jamaica's an interesting place, though. We always would have police from wherever we were assigned to us. We had the Jamaican police assigned to us. And one of the things that really caught my eye is when we went to a restaurant. There's 2 guys outside walking around with shotguns. And Byrne kind of nudged me and he said, they're on our side, right? I said, yeah, go, they're on our side.
Before we move on to the Kane years, from your vantage point, how should posterity regard Brendan Byrne?
I think Brendan Byrne, I think history is going to be very kind to him. I think they're going to look at everything he did, casino gambling, the Pinelands, and I drive through the Pinelands every day that I go to Atlantic City, and it hasn't changed in 10 years, and I remember going there when he was governor, and it hasn't changed at all. No building, no construction, a lot of limitations on what goes on down there. I was a trooper at the State House during the income tax legislation, and sometimes we were there till 5 o'clock in the morning. And although nobody likes to be taxed, that was an interesting time, and I think it was something that had to happen at the time. But I think history is going to be very, very good to him. I think he is probably one of the better governors that New Jersey has ever had.
You put casino gambling right up there with the Pinelands, and when you drive through the Pinelands, you end up at the Casino Control Commission, where you've been for the last 10 years. Has that experiment panned out?
You mean the casinos itself?
Yes.
Yeah. It's done very well. They raise about $400 or $500 million a year for the state, which goes to pay for the disabled and seniors. They're having a tough time right now because of Philadelphia and New York and Delaware, which just got sports betting. Maryland just approved casinos. As a personal comment, I think they had it good for 25 or 26 years, and they really should have concentrated more on building rooms. There's always a battle down there between the airlines and the hotel industry. They need an airline to fly into Atlantic City Airport. Atlantic City Airport is one of the biggest airports in the country. It's an emergency landing site for the space shuttle. That's how big the runway is, and it's really an underused airport. But the airlines won't fly in there because they say there's not enough hotel rooms. The conventions won't come in because there's not enough hotel rooms. And they really should have been building more hotel rooms over the years. There was a man named Paul Rubley who ran Tropicana before it got sold. This is when I first went there. And he always said, at these gaming conferences, he'd always get up and say, you know, if you build the rooms, the people will come. And he's right. They build the rooms, and the rooms are filled. So I think that's where they missed the boat.
So is it kind of over for New Jersey as a gambling mecca?
I don't think it's over. I think they've hit one of those points where everything is just kind of static, but it'll start to go again. I think once this economic situation starts to be in a state of recovery, I think it'll start to pick up again. And the summertime's coming. I mean, this is the time when people start coming back to Atlantic City. I've noticed my office is right on the boardwalk, and I've noticed now there's more and more people on the boardwalk. They're doing real good on the weekends, but it's during the week that where it's really slow right now.
Are you pro-gambling? Just this morning there's a front page Star Ledger opinion piece on how we've got enough gambling in this country or in this state. Where do you fall on that issue?
It's something that I've never really done a lot of. I'm not against it. I think if it's legalized and it's controlled, if people want to do it, that's up to them. Brendan Byrne always said that when he signed the bill, he just made gambling in Atlantic City legal because it was going on forever down there, from what I am told.
Let's take a short break and then talk about Tom Kane.
Okay. I could tell you a funny Brendan Byrne story too if you want it.
Yeah.
Okay.
When we turn the tape back on, we're going to get to Tom Kane, but you had a story you wanted to tell about Brendan Byrne.
My most embarrassing moment in executive protection. And after Brendan Byrne does a lunch at Pal's Cabin right after Christmas, and each of us have to say something. And I got up and I reminded him of this, and I said, "Do you remember this?" And he said, "Oh yeah." It's inauguration night. He had just been reelected, and of course, nobody thought he would ever get reelected. One-term Byrne. He delivers his inaugural address. We go back to Morven for some downtime, and we are going to drive up to, I think it was a Hilton on Route 17, because if I remember correctly, his inaugural event was at the Meadowlands, the inaugural ball or whatever. So we're driving up probably around 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Somebody had given him a television that runs on batteries, which was the new technology of the day. And it's snowing like crazy. The turnpike has snow on the road, which you don't normally see, but there's about 6 inches of snow. It was really coming down bad. And he's sitting next to me in the front seat. His wife and 2 of his kids are in the back seat. We were driving Lincolns at the time, and on the left arm rest for the driver are the buttons for the seat and the windows, and all the buttons are the same. So you really have to look to see what you're doing. So he's got the television in his lap with the antenna sticking out the window, and NJN is replaying his inaugural address, and he's in the middle of it. So I'm driving, and there's probably a 20-car motorcade, and so I move the seat, and all of a sudden I hear him say, "Did you do that?" And I looked over, and the television antenna is making a perfect letter V, sticking out the window and flapping against the car. And the screen on the television is now all white.
You rolled the window up.
I rolled the window up
and smashed the antenna.
Yes, yes.
Good one.
So he took the antenna and threw it on the dashboard and said something like, you know, "Oh darn," or something. And I wanted to crawl under the seat. I think between the time that happened and the time I got to the hotel, I think I probably apologized 100 times. I followed him into his hotel room and once more said I was sorry. And he turned around and looked at me and said, "Look, forget about it, okay? Forget about it." So that was my most embarrassing moment in executive protection.
And one more thing before we get to Tom Kane. We were talking off camera briefly about the governance of Atlantic City, something you know a lot about. And the question was posed, should Brendan Byrne have put some kind of regional commission in control of Atlantic City when he introduced casino gambling there, or some sort of state apparatus? And we're wondering what your view is on that.
I do. I think there is too much at stake there, and I think that the state really needs to have a bigger hand in what goes on in Atlantic City. But I was told that that's something that would have really been a roadblock with the referendum. It probably would not have passed had that been part of the referendum, and that it also may have hurt at the time the sitting senator Steve Persky. So, and I still feel that way. By the way, I still think there's too much at stake down there. I'll give you an example. They've been talking about Pacific Avenue, which is the street closest to the ocean, and it's one of the main streets in Atlantic City. It's a 4-lane highway. It really should be one way, and they've been talking about that for 40 years. But the government in Atlantic City, for some reason, they just do not want to do it. And if you look out on a Saturday night at that street, it looks like New York City. It's just totally congested. It's a terrible traffic pattern, but it's things like that really need to be done that probably are never going to happen, and it's going to hurt the industry.
All right, let's move on into the Kane years. Were you yet head of the Executive Protection Unit at the end of the Byrne years, or just head of the group that covered the governor? Head
of the group that covered the governor, and then when Tom Kane became governor, after about a year, I became the head of the entire Executive Protection Unit.
When there's a change in administration, do all the troopers in executive protection stay on? Do some depart? Is there any changing of the guard as far as troopers go?
Not really. It's always been, because it's always drilled into the troopers that you don't get involved in politics. You just do your job and stay out of, the governmental end of it, and you're just there for executive protection. I think the governor sees that you're professional, and no, they don't change.
So Tom Kane was elected in the closest election in modern state history. You didn't know for a while who you were going to be working for next.
It was a tough time for us because we had 3 governors we were taking care of: Kane, Florio, and Byrne. And we did it with no additional personnel. Florio, we would only do Florio when he would come in the state, which was probably like Thursday to Sunday, because he was still in Congress, so he'd have to go back to Congress during the week. Generally what happens is sometime before the election, we meet with both staff of candidates and the staff, and we tell them basically what's going to happen, which is election night. There'll be a contingent of troopers come to each camp, and whoever wins, they have us for the next 4 years. And I will say it's very difficult, and from an executive protection standpoint, you have to be aware that you're living in somebody else's house, even if it's state-owned. You have to be aware of that, because it's got to be difficult for the family. Probably a little more easier for Kane because of his background. He always had people living in the house who were not family.
Servants.
Yeah, servants. Servants, drivers.
What was different about living with Kane from living with Byrne?
Well, living with Byrne was in a state house. Living with Kane, a state-owned house. Living with Kane was in his private house in Livingston. Initially, we took over one of the rooms in his house because it's a 24-hour operation, and eventually we purchased a trailer and moved it up on his property, and that's where the troopers were stationed up there.
Was it? Did it make your job more difficult that he was living in his personal home an hour or more from the State House, as opposed to in an official residence 15 minutes up the road?
Yeah, it did, because we had the troopers live all over the state, and we had guys who live in, for example, Gloucester County, who are now driving to Livingston when they had to go to work. It made it difficult. It made it difficult to secure his house.
How so?
Well, because it's privately owned. We put in an alarm system around the perimeter of the house, so that if somebody was walking up through the woods, he lived on top of I say on top of a hill. It was the family estate, if I remember correctly, owned that whole property. His mother and father's house was on the other side of the hill. And you have to be mindful of the fact that this is somebody's house. You know, you can't just go in and take over just for security reasons. So we tried to be mindful of that. But we had sensors up there and alarms, so that if anybody was coming up, we would know.
How was he personally to work with?
He was a great guy. He's very easygoing. Again, once he developed that confidence, if you told him something, he would go along with what you wanted to do. I guess I can say this now. When he was giving his inaugural address, his first inaugural address, we had a threat against him, and we had a bulletproof coat that he had to put on.
Wow.
He's told that story, so that's why I think I can say it.
How did the threat come in? Do you recall?
I think it came in by telephone.
So there's such a thing as a bulletproof coat?
Oh, sure. Bulletproof anything.
You say you were promoted to head of Executive Protection Unit about 1 year into the Kane administration?
About 1 or 2 years, yeah.
Did the governor have anything to do with that?
No, actually the colonel did.
Colonel Pagano?
Colonel Pagano.
Who we're going to be talking to later today.
Yeah.
He had been superintendent of the state police for a good number of years by that point?
Yeah, actually he was promoted to superintendent when I was I had talked about being a uniformed trooper at the State House for a short time. I was there when he was selected. As a matter of fact, somewhere in the State House, when the new colonel is sworn in, there's a picture of the State House troopers and him. And I'm in that picture somewhere. I think that was 1975, I think.
And, I guess this was a happy moment for you, being promoted like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it was a promotion to lieutenant. A lot of responsibility. As I said, we had the governor, we had the attorney general, we had the secretary of state. Later on, the chief of staff had a trooper. And we traveled a lot more with Kane out of the country. In fact, the first trip we took was to Italy.
Why was Kane traveling more than Byrne?
Just promoting the state more. I mean, the Italy trip was a family thing. He had a sister that lived over there. But that's another funny story. We had an audience with the Pope. About 3 weeks before, they have these ethnic days where, like for example, in this particular situation, the Polish people would come into the State House and they would have pictures and things all over the state capitol. This Polish group came in and had mentioned that they were going to be in Italy to go see the Pope the same time we were. And we were concerned that they would kind of take away from the governor's visit. When we were escorted into the Vatican, into a special room, John Paul was the Pope, who was Polish. This group from Trenton was also there at the same time. And it worked out fantastic. When he walked in, they started singing the Polish national anthem. And he's singing it along with them. He went around and shook everybody's hand, and he gave a little speech about when he was in New Jersey. It was really good. It was fun.
What was the difference in tone around Kane from Byrne?
Tom Kane always used to say that you pick the best people, you put them in the job, and you let them do it. And I think that was also I think that was also Byrne's way. But Byrne seemed to get a little more involved in things. For example, Brendan Byrne at Morven would interview every judicial candidate. Tom Kane never did that. I think Byrne got a little more involved in certain things than Tom Kane did.
Do you think that's a Democrat-Republican thing, or do you think that's a personality thing?
No, I think that's a style of leadership. Not that Kane didn't. I mean, I don't think either one was a micromanager, but it's just a different way that they handled things. But I think both were very effective.
You said that the people around Byrne were kind of Ivy League and impressed you in that regard. Mm-hmm. How would you characterize the people around Kane?
Very impressive. A lot of business people who made a lot of money, who were very successful. High degree of integrity, just like with Brendan Byrne. I think a lot of their staffs were a lot alike. I mean, they were very competent, very capable, very honest, and really did the best job that they could. It seemed like the transition was almost seamless. I mean, it seemed like not that a lot of the things that Brendan Byrne was doing, Tom Kane was doing, but it was the same. We were comfortable with the same with both people.
Was there this Ivy League bent in the Kane team, or was it a little more business?
I think it was a little more business. A little more business. Yeah, maybe not as much Ivy League, although Kane was Ivy League.
How about in their personal interests and pursuits? You said that Byrne was a big sports guy. What was Kane?
Kane was a sports guy, but not to the degree that Byrne was. They were both big opera fans, and I had never been to the opera. Both Byrne and Kane. Byrne had a friend named Maria Jaritza, who apparently during the early 20s was the diva of the Met. She was still alive when he was governor. A couple of times we went to her box at the Met, and in fact I met Mrs. General MacArthur's widow she was in the box at one time. Kane was also a big opera fan, and he used to play the opera all the time in the car. And
how was that for you?
Well, at some point he thought it was really distracting, so he got like a Walkman or something that played a disc.
Did you appreciate that?
Yeah, I did.
Do you miss the opera now?
No, I don't miss it.
Kane was a tennis player also.
Yeah, Kane was a tennis player. He played every weekend, sometimes during the week.
Did Byrne and Kane play tennis together?
Yeah, yes, they did. They play every year at the Governor's Tennis Tournament, but they also played. They would also play from time to time, during the week. One of the things that really impressed me about those two guys is I thought they really acted the way governors should act with each other. And this is not a shot at any other governor, but they remained friends. They still do a weekly column in the Ledger. They talk frequently, and they get along, which again is good for the state, I think.
You said that it was Colonel Pagano who put you in charge of the Executive Protection Unit. You think he ran that by the governor before making a move like that?
No, I don't.
You don't?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't. He may have ran it by somebody else, but there was a little confusion when that happened. The trooper that I replaced, Jake Eaton, went to the State House and was put in a position which would eventually promoted him to captain. He would have been in charge of the whole security operation at the State House. But there seemed to be a little confusion in the beginning. But Pagano eventually talked to the governor, explained to him, and he kind of...
Did you stay with Kane through the two Kane terms?
Yes, yeah, I did. And I was there for Florio for the first 7 months.
And then what happened?
I got transferred.
Something you wanted, or?
No, it was I was transferred out. And you know what? In reality, I mean, it was time for me to move on. I had been there for, I guess, 11 years. And actually, it was a good thing because it worked out to my benefit later on. I got sent to field operations, which is the uniform part of the state police, and then I spent some time with the. After another transfer, I spent some time with the unit that does crime scene investigations, and then I eventually got transferred to the academy as the commandant, which is it's a big deal in the state police. It's one of the, again, I had mentioned earlier, it's one of the better jobs that I've ever had.
If memory serves me correctly, I used to see you at the State House in the 80s.
Yeah.
Sometimes in uniform and sometimes not.
Right.
What determined whether you would put the uniform on or not?
It depends what was going on. There were times that the governor would ask us to be in uniform. For example, when Brendan Byrne signed the bill in Atlantic City creating casino gambling, he wanted us in uniform. I don't know why, because obviously he didn't ask. But we were in uniform that day. We had about 10 troopers down there from the Executive Protection Unit, and we were down there for about 4 days. And it's kind of ironic that I was there when they signed the bill, and I ended up in the Casino Control Commission. I never thought that would happen. I never even entered my mind.
How did that happen?
I guess Governor Whitman was kind enough to offer it to me.
Well, you say that you rose through the ranks of the state police to commandant of the academy,
Right.
Which has got to be one of the top handful of jobs in the state police.
It is because, and I always used to equate this to Paris Island and the Marines. I mean, it's where you make troopers. It's the most important job, I think, one of the most important jobs of the state police, because that's where troopers are created. That's where you give them the skill sets that they need. It's where you teach them how to be troopers.
How long did you do that job?
I was there for about 3.5 years. I had 3 state police classes go through, which probably amounted to about 400 troopers. And at the time, we were training municipal police also. I think we did 6 municipal police classes. Plus, there's always in-service training going on there. There's always some kind of training going on at the academy, which is now at Seagirt.
How does our state police stack up against other states' state police?
I think. Well, of course, I think they're the best. I think they're the best trained. I think they're the best equipped. The selection process is very difficult to get in, and you see that when you travel throughout the states. It seems like the northeastern United States, the state police are basically operate the same. More so when you get down to down south, where the sheriffs are really they really run the state law enforcement agencies. But I remember one time when I was the head of the academy. The troopers that had academies for different states, we had a meeting up in Boston, and the Massachusetts trooper who was the head of his academy looked at our one of our brochures with the names of our troopers and all the degrees that they had. They all had master's degrees, and he said, "Geez, how do you get these guys with all these master's degrees? It's really impressive." So I think that says a lot about the state police.
What do you think is different about guarding the governor of New Jersey than perhaps guarding the governor of other states? Is there any difference?
Yeah, I do. Depending on the state that you're talking about. For example, when Brendan Byrne was governor, we were going to go to Las Vegas for something, and I called the governor's residence out there. The governor was named Michael Callahan. And when I called the residence, he picked up the phone, and I was kind of stunned, you know. He said, I asked for one of the troopers, and he said, "Well, they're not here right now." I said, "Well, who am I speaking with?" He said, "This is the governor." So my first inclination was to say, "Come on, you're kidding me, right?" But I didn't say that. And I told him that we were coming out there, and we always would ask for a trooper from that state to be with us who knew the area. And he said, "Well, I generally don't bother those guys for those kinds of things." He said, "But what does Brendan need?" And I said, "Sir, we'd just love to have somebody assigned to us who can show us around Atlantic City, or show us around Las Vegas." And he said, "Well, I'll get a Las Vegas police officer assigned to you." So I think it depends on the state. Probably, again, the Northeast, where most of the population lives in this country. It's probably a lot alike protecting the governor of New Jersey as governor of Connecticut or Massachusetts.
Do you get the sense that the governor of New Jersey is a more important figure in New Jersey than the governor of Pennsylvania or New York or Delaware or Massachusetts is in their own state?
Absolutely. As I'm sure you know, the governor of New Jersey is probably the most powerful governor of all the states. And you see that when you travel around to the different states. And I think they also understand that too when you go to different states.
Over the course of your career, has the role of the state police in law enforcement in the state changed, evolved? Kind of crimes they deal with differ?
Well,
their stature in the state change in any way? What's changed about the state police, if anything?
They've become more progressive. They've changed with the times, and I think that is what a police agency has to do. If you don't keep up with the times, if you don't change the way you do business, and you have to do that all the time. You have to keep changing. And yes, the state police has done that. They have, for example, they have a computer crimes unit now that's where they catch these predators. That's something that was just coming into fruition when I was probably my last couple of years in the state police. But it's things like that. And then, of course, 9/11 changed everything. That changed the way police agencies do business. One good thing that I think that happened is out of the 9/11 Commission, police agencies have to communicate more with each other. And I think as a result of the 9/11 Commission, that's happening. It's interesting, the governors that I met over the years when I was in executive protection, who you would see later on who did different things. For example, Jim Thompson, who was the governor of Illinois, he ended up on the 9/11 Commission. From time to time, I would run into Hugh Carey in New York, who was the governor when Byrne was governor, and watching those two Irish guys together when they were governors, that was like a show. That was hilarious. I had mentioned I had called the governor's office in Nevada. Michael Callahan was his name, and he was a Marine. He was also in the Army in Korea, and he lost part of his leg. And after I was in the Casino Control Commission, he was working for a newspaper out there. He was the editor of, I think, the Las Vegas Sun. And I called him up and asked him if I'd come over and see him for a few minutes. He did not remember me and our phone conversation, but spent about half an hour with him. He was an interesting guy.
Who else did you meet?
Nelson Rockefeller. Michael Dukakis, met Ted Kennedy, and I just read something recently about Ted Kennedy. I never knew this. He was contacted by the Green Bay Packers after his college football career, but he decided to go to law school instead. Got a letter from the guy who was the coach at the time, was interested in playing for them. But Byrne used to run this, it was called the RFK. It eventually became the Governor's Tennis Tournament, but it was the RFK tournament. Ethel Kennedy would come down, and some of the other Kennedys when they would do the tennis thing in Princeton.
And in fact, your service in the Executive Protection Unit put you in such touch with the governmental apparatus that you became part of it. Is that?
Yeah, I did.
Sort of a fair statement?
Yes, it is.
We left off with you as commandant at the academy, but then Governor Whitman made you acting superintendent for about 8 or 9 months. Is that right?
Actually, it was 11 months. I was acting superintendent.
How did that come about?
It was a result of the racial profiling situation. Carl Williams resigned, and I was made acting superintendent. And I was acting superintendent for 11 months. Got interviewed for the job, but no, I didn't get the job.
Did you want the job?
Yeah, absolutely.
Interviewed by the governor?
The second time, there were 2 rounds of interviews. I made the first cut, and the second time was interviewed by her.
And who did she select? I don't recall.
Carson Dunbar, who was a trooper for about 3 or 4 years, and then went into the FBI.
How was your experience as acting superintendent?
It was a difficult time because of the racial profiling situation. There were a lot of lawsuits by troopers who thought that they had been wronged by the state police. It was a difficult time. It really was.
So you don't look back fondly on your 11 months in the big chair?
I do. No, I do. I had a lot of good times, but it was just a difficult time because of the unsettling atmosphere of not knowing whether you were going to get the job or not, and it was difficult. The one thing I had told Peter Venero, he called me up. I'll never forget this. I called me up on a Sunday morning in February.
He was what at the time?
He was the Attorney General. He called me up on a Sunday morning at 10 o'clock and told me that Carl Williams was going to resign and he wanted me to be the acting superintendent. And
you were the commandant at the time?
No, I was the deputy superintendent at the time. I was the lieutenant colonel. And the only thing I said to Peter Venero was, I said, I will be happy to do this, but please don't let this thing drag out too long. You know, whatever you're going to do, please try to do it as fast as you can.
Why?
Because I didn't think it's good for an organization to not have a permanent head. And I was right. It's just unsettling. And I don't know what the holdup was. That was way over my head. It was above my level.
Given the experience of the past 30, 40 years in the state police, would you say that someone who rises up from within the ranks is much more likely to do a good job than someone brought in from outside?
Yeah, I do. Only because you're coming up through the system, you know the system, you understand the system, not only the state police system, but the political system, which is important. You have to understand how the State House operates, what goes on down there. And it's difficult for somebody coming in from the outside. Although he was a Jersey trooper for a couple of years, he was with the FBI, and he had a difficult time. I'm not saying he didn't do a good job, but I would think he would have a year of a learning curve, and you really need to be involved in other things. And you know, when you're trying to learn about the organization, you're trying to play catch up. It's tough. It's got to be tough.
So you didn't get the appointment as superintendent Carson Dunbar did. Was being appointed to the Casino Control Commission a consolation prize?
Some people have said that.
Was it something you wanted?
It's not anything that I ever thought of, but when it was offered to me, I thought, yeah, it would be good. It would be a good thing to do, because it's something that I had never been involved in before. There is a state police contingent down there who deal with the casinos, but the things like the legal aspect of dealing with the casinos, the financial aspect of dealing with casinos, that's something that I had never been involved in, and it's been interesting.
There's also a Division of Gaming Enforcement. Is that yet? You say there's a unit of the state police down there, but the Division of Gaming Enforcement is also down there. Is state police part of DGE?
They're part of DGE, as well as a number of attorneys and civilian investigators. And the way it works is the DGE does the investigations and then presents it to us, and we're like judges. We like to make decisions on whether whatever they have investigated should be approved or not approved.
How big is the DGE and how big is the Casino Control Commission in terms of numbers of people who work there?
I think right now we're probably around 290, and the Division of Gaming Enforcement is probably around 300.
That's a lot of people.
It is a lot of people. Totally funded by the casino industry.
Not by the taxpayer?
Nothing that we do is state money.
10 years now you've been doing that.
Yeah, I've had 2 terms. 2 terms is the most you can do, and I'm at the end of my last year. August the 5th is my termination date.
Less than 2 months from today.
Yes.
And then you're going to go off to the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey as superintendent of police there.
Yeah, I am.
That's a big job.
It's a big job. I'm looking forward to it. It's a challenge. I've had some contact with them over the years in executive protection when we would do airports and tunnels and bridges. And I've known some of the Port Authority police aside from that. But it's a big job. It is.
They suffered a tremendous hit on 9/11.
Yeah, 33 officers were killed, as well as Fred Marone, who was a lieutenant colonel in the state police, who at the time was the superintendent of Port Authority Police.
How did this job offer come about?
The Governor Corzine, asked me if I would be interested in it.
Is it the governor of New Jersey's choice, or could either governor have put somebody up for this? I ask that knowing that there are certain positions historically or traditionally that New Jersey gets to pick the chairman and New York gets to pick the executive director. Right. Does New Jersey get to pick the superintendent?
It seems, not always, but it seems more often than not it's a Jersey person.
What kind of tenure does one serve as superintendent? Is there any kind of fixed term to it?
No, there's no term. I started on July the 6th.
You start there on July 6th?
I found that out yesterday.
Is it kind of nervous-making to be stepping into what do they have, 1,200 officers, 1,500 officers?
I think it's 1,800.
1,800 officers.
Yeah.
You're about to step into a brand new culture that you've never been part of.
Right.
And you have to run it.
Yes, I do.
Based on what we just said about running the state police and coming up through the ranks and the culture, is there certain daunting quality to the responsibility you're about to assume?
Well, I think foremost you have to remember that it's not the state police. It's a different organization. You don't want to make it the state police. They have, from everything that I have been told and learned, it's a good organization. They have their own way of doing things, and we'll get up there and look at the way things are done, and if I can improve on things, fine. But I'm going to have a little bit of a learning curve.
Well, we wish you luck. We thank you for talking to us about your experiences at the State House.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.